again this year. We were at, I think 50% 7 years ago, then we ticked it up to 75. Last year we ticked it up to 100. This year we're recommending to tip it back to 75. It makes the burden a lot easier on the general fund at that number and help us met some of the other goals. Also in that regard, the fund is funded reasonably well, sitting around $2 million or so dollars. So with miscellaneous revenues and the contribution, our purchases have ranged around $2 million a year, $1.5–2 million a year. So when we stay in that window, we can manage, get equipment we need, and keep the leases down for all the funds. The big one, we reduced, or recommending staying or going back to your rollback rate, going from 4.2678 mils to the rollback rate of 4.1086 mils, which is a tax reduction. To help us do that, we did increase the fire assessment fee. You all voted on that a couple meetings ago. Our health insurance, unfortunately, is going up a little bit. That's $661,000 across the entire organization. That's about a $400,000 impact to the general fund. We were able to absorb that, though, so the employee contribution remains the same, but we are going to start leaning a little bit on the retirees so that they have to pay above the $400 that they were provided. Our proposal for the salaries is a 3% increase, and again, that's based on the program that we created a few years ago, where if you receive a meets or exceed, you receive the 3% COLA/merit raise. We'll talk about a little bit of bonuses for special folks who exceed. We did increase union, bottom of the ranges at 3% and 2%. There is a 3% increase in there for the city manager. The area that I did highlight as red, where I do think we're going to have some issue moving forward, which we'll hopefully iron out between now and the end of the fiscal year, is our collective bargaining agreements for the Fire Association as well as the PBA. We met with the Fire Association yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. We proposed a 3-3 contract, 3% raises over 3 years. They proposed essentially an 8% contract, 8.55 over 3 years. So that's obviously a pretty big gap, a couple $100,000. So I contacted the commissioners, and obviously we set up a shade meeting, an executive shade meeting under your privilege to discuss collective bargaining matters in private, and that meeting is set up for Monday. So I'll provide you more of that data, and hopefully you guys can give me some direction on how you want to fill that gap. Those are the highlights. As far as how we got there, I think there's just a natural matriculation of budget cuts and some revenue increases offset with some sifting of the blocks, but there's always casualties. And I think these casualties are minor. The first one being the education fund that the commission created last year. We put $50,000 towards that. We did not fund that this year. However, we only spent 18 of the 50,000. So if you roll that over, you still have enough funding in that to cover you for this year based on that trend. So we opted not to put additional monies in there. The demolition program is about empty. The FSL program, the CRAs have really sufficient funding, and we'll talk about that Thursday. There's still a little bit of money left in the rehab program and the CRAs, not too much in the general fund, and there's really no new capital projects, but you've got considerable capital projects that we're completing up with the pool project, with some of the stuff in the downtown project, the teen center project. And where we are deficient, you may want to look to your homeless money. We still have that $100,000 that we'll recommend to roll over, but we did not refund that. So all in all, I think that's not huge bad news. Where we did have new programs, the first thing we would bring to your attention is the police department. You voted, I think about a month ago, to add the 4 SROs. That's a total cost of a total new cost of about 125,000. So now there's 4 SROs versus the 2. But we also received $253,000 that offsets that funding. So there actually is a little bit more revenue coming from the school board than we'll be spending on police officers. This year, and this is a new one on your agenda for the 13th, we'll be recommending that you add body cams for the police officers. We are one of the last departments in Lake to change to that. To do that, the chief and IT need kind of 2 pieces. One, we believe we'll need an evidence technician to manage the video and catalog the video and review the video and delete the video, which will be cumbersome. So one position there, and then the body cams and the software and computer support itself. The body cams for about 70 officers is $166,900. Each of those cameras are expected to have about a 3-year life expectancy. So while it's a one-time capital cost, you're probably faced with it every 3 years. And then you have the support at about $50,000. So a recurring cost of about $62,000, and the $216,000 in the one-time or every 3-year cost. Also, you guys already voted on this, but so it's just an addition into the budget, which is the Public Works janitorial support. When we're having some issues with the janitorial contract, we recommended to you to change that from a contract back to an in-house. The 2 employees that we have on that costs about $85,000 versus a contract cost of $53,600. And if you recall, the next low bidder after we terminated the previous contract was in the $70,000 ballpark. So we felt like we could manage that a lot better. And I think hopefully everybody's seen the results there. So those things, we made adjustments on the fly this fiscal year, but then we kind of memorialize it in the people plan for fiscal year 21. So moving to taxes, a quick look at tax. The good news, and we've talked about this a little bit, is really the overwhelmingly the city saw, and if you can read this number, about 10.8% overall growth. But then, like we do every year, we break that down into the general fund, the city, and then the 4 CRAs and their incremental values. So our total taxable value went from about $1.4 billion to about $1.5 billion. In money, at the old millage rate, that's about $5.8 million versus $6.2. If you use the current rate, that's about $6.4. So I'll show you that and break that down a little bit. So this is your assessed value, and then that breaks down into what that value generates in terms of dollars with your millage rate. So last year we generated about $5.8 million. This year we look to generate about $6.2 million at your rollback rate. And then the final chart shows you kind of some pros and cons. Going with the rollback rate, you actually capture about 2.7% growth in the general fund, so that almost hits that 3% annual number. But you leave about $206,000 on the table if you would have gone with your current rate, but the current rate would have been actually almost a 4% increase. So that's, if everybody can read the charts up there, that's what that shows. So all in all, even though you go with the rollback number, which really is a big relief for businesses, because they would have seen in the general fund upwards of 10% of an increase in taxes, they stay at the current rate, which should be some support to them moving forward next year. Every year, as we adjust kind of the tax rate and the assessments, we've kind of tried to offset that with the electric fund, and that's kind of been our fund independent strategy, to be a utility first and keep our utilities and our general fund as separate as possible. So we tackled that again this year. And so our annually we compare your average house to your Leesburg taxes, to your fire assessment fee, to what your annual electric bill is, and take that package and compare it to show you how we actually save you money by considering the whole three to provide tax relief to businesses and residents. In fiscal year 20, the average house at about $125,000 in Leesburg, after you pay your Leesburg taxes, your fiscal year 20 fire assessment fee, and your Leesburg electric rate, and that assumes 1,000 kilowatts a month, which is about 65% of our usage in Leesburg. That would be a total annual bill of about $1,733. In fiscal year 21, if you assume a 3% increase and you use the rollback rate, you actually go up $4 on that house. So that's a cost of $3, but I put that in green because that was good. In exchange, we increased the fire assessment fee at $87, so that saved you $29, or that cost you $29. That's in red. But then also we are projecting an 86-cent decrease on the electric rates, so that saves you $10. So the package there is actually an increase of $22 to the average household. However, as your value of your home goes up and your usage goes up, there is a break-free number of that, where that's actually a decrease for folks. Okay, so that was kind of ugly, although I don't think real ugly, $22. So I wanted to remind everybody of these two numbers down here on the bottom of the screen and here, which shows the power cost adjustments that you passed on. So the power cost adjustment in May, June, and July, that was a $10 savings on 1,000 kW. The more electric you use, the more you saved on that number. So you saved actually $30 there. And August and September, we're projecting that we're going to have to incrementally put back the power cost adjustment in there at about $2.50 a month, or $2.50 at 1,000. That's $2.50. So you're looking at about a $15 savings there. So we saved the typical household customer there $45. So if you marry the $45 with the $22 you're going to charge them next year, they still have $23 in their pocket. So all that basically shows little hocus pocus there, but all in all, I think what that shows is working to keep the general fund separate from the electric as much as possible and still provide as much relief as you can. So I'll digress a little bit more and talk about electric rates. Our electric rate, regionally competitive, and then this chart here, see, I had the thing. This blue chart typically shows, for the most part of fiscal year 20, our electric rate was about $112.96. In May, we dropped $10 off of it. That reflected the power cost adjustment, and then you see it tip back up. That $2.50 for August and September, but then it drops off again with a $2.50 charge in it for power cost adjustment in October. But this dip represents the 86 cents decrease, and then in November we grab you for another $2.50 to probably where we're going to project in February sometime. We may be back to the full $10. Again, we'll monitor that, report back to you. I just felt like this is in full disclosure where the power cost adjustment goes. If FMPA is true to form, they're conservative on their projections, which keep our power cost recoveries high, which is a good thing. And then when those power cost recoveries are high, we will be slow to put back in the power cost adjustment. Okay. So I digress on that, but all that's interrelated, and we take a big look at that every year and figure out how we best formulate the general fund moving forward. So in real brief now, general fund is actually down about 3.3 million, or 10%. Most of that is, really the general fund is a wash. That big change is you moved a big chunk of cash from your from your reserve account to your capital account to do the pool project. So that's why you got the big decrease. Otherwise, the general fund is pretty much a big giant, the same as we were last year. And then again, some of the things that we did for tax relief. Rollback rate at 4.1086. The decrease and repeal, or not decrease, but complete repeal of the business tax receipts. We increased license and we increased the fire assessment fee, $300,000. We intergovernmental revenue, with the state. We reduced for COVID by about 400 grand, and then we have the contracts from the resource officers. Discretionary sales tax monies, we decreased due to COVID. Gas taxes, we reduced to COVID. We reduced the electric transfer. That's part of it. That was the 86 cents decrease. So the general fund transfer, this is a big drop too. We went from 7.86% to 7%. Ultimately, I think your long-term goal needs to be 6% there because that matches a franchise fee if you were a non-municipal electric utility. So that one I think is a big feather in your hat. And then the fund balance number I just spoke to you of. That's what it all looks like in a pie chart. And then just a couple of other things to keep in mind as gauges and barometer where we stand financially. We project the general fund balance to be about $11 million. So we've stayed steady in there. I think it was in fiscal year 14, we took that big $4 million cash out and put it towards this building, so that reduced us to that 12.7. So we've been hanging around that number here for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those 5, 6 fiscal years. So that's a good thing. We also talk about our capital projects cash that we do, and that's really was a balance of money above $7.5 million in your reserve fund. Mind you, the GFO recommendation is, let me see if I can go back to that chart. The GFO recommendation is on this chart is at 4, but our recommendation is you keep it at 7.5, and then you just show the differences. So you still have about $3.5 million in the general fund if you want to use that for capital projects, mixed with the remainder of the fiber money at about 1.3 million, and so you've got about $4.8 million of unallocated capital monies for other projects. And we'll talk about that Thursday night. So with that, we go in, you kind of see the ups and the downs of the total general fund. Most of the changes are in the service providing departments. That's where we typically see the increases the most, police, fire, and public works. And then we go into the breakdowns of the individual departments. Any questions yet?
Is this the last year for the fiber payments?
Yeah, that's it. You put away about you put away just 8.1 million. You spent 4 million here, so that's down to 4, and then you spent I think we took about 3 to go to the swimming pool, and that leaves you with the 1.3.
Okay, thank
So
you.
basically, you've spent the fiber money on this facility and the pool, and you still have 1.3 in your pocket.
Any other questions? Guess not. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a point where we'll break down each department in the general fund, kind of item by item, and gets a little boring here because everything's pretty typical. So.
Excuse me, before you get going on the general fund, did you come up with a worksheet for the civic funding that we can work from?
Into the program.
Yeah, but it would be good to have a sheet of paper in front of us so we can write down the things.
Okay. Do you want those numbers now?
It would be good, yeah.
All right. These are your civic fund numbers. Do you guys have a laptop with this program in front of you?
No.
Okay. Leesburg Partnership, $38,710.
It's my understanding that they keep the total amount of that money. They don't share it with the Art Center or any of the others that fall underneath there.
I can't answer that question. That's a partnership
I'm telling
question.
you right now, that's it. They keep all the money themselves. So I think we might want to think about the Arts Center as well, as a separate function.
Leesburg Art Festival, $10,670.
All right. I think you might want to raise that a little bit.
Boys and Girls Club, $5,000. Leesburg Area Chamber of Commerce, $5,000. Community Development Corporation, 3,880. Melon Patch Player Theater, 5,500. Leesburg High School Band, 1,455. Cemetery, 111,760, for a total of 181,975, and we pay that out of surplus revenues in the solid waste fund. Those, I'm going to say, have been the same funding levels for the past 3 years. They haven't changed a penny. Do you guys want to just jump to civic funding right now and then go back to?
No, go back to what you were doing. I just wanted the numbers
Okay.
so we can think about this.
Okay.
I need the last two, though. I was trying to keep.
Okay, hold on. I'll get them for you.
Can't read it.
Okay. You left off at Melon Patch, Commissioner,
5,500.
5,500. Leesburg High School Band, 1,455. Cemetery, 111,760.
Thank you.
Okay, so jumping back to the individual departments in the general fund, we start off with the City Commission. Yeah, I'll go back and do that. I will hit this.
Hey, before the individual departments, where you have the revenue breakdown, the communication services tax, how is that number calculated? I see it varies a lot between years.
It's a percentage that we get, but it hasn't been coming in as high as what I've been budgeting.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna assume, I'll be honest, the state revenues are not, we tend to not want to use those anymore because they're not turning out to be accurate.
Got
So
it.
I felt like I need to drop it when you can see 19 went way down.
Okay, so you just
So-
took the actual 19 number.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
the state revenues, I'm just starting to really not trust to use, so.
And then also, I had a question on the charges for service where we have the reimbursed for the county resource officer. I mean, I know why that's up because of the agreement. Why do we put it there as opposed to with the police department as an offset?
Yeah.
It makes it seem like the police department's growing a little more than it probably is.
Probably a Jim question, but that's just the typical municipal
Okay.
accounting way to put a general revenue.
Okay. And then the interest on investments, how do we get that number?
We looked at what we got in 19 and, tried to drop it. It's just kind of looking at what we're getting. It's kind of where we've been trending it out.
Okay, it was a little, that seems maybe a little optimistic given the current environment, but. And then the antenna tower fees, did we lose antennas when we sold the 470 property or?
Yes.
Okay.
What was that last question?
The antenna revenues were down from, leasing out. We had cell towers that we leased and they dropped a lot, but it was because when we sold property to villages, there was some on that, so we lost those.
And and Commissioner, that was actually a quid pro quo, because I think we had about 4 antenna contracts. 2 of the antennas were on the north side that we sold, that we lost that revenue, because those became villages towers now, and 2 were on the south side. When we had those revenues, we put all of that revenue into the fiber fund, and then when we sold the fiber utility, we took that money. And the sale of the fiber system and the sale of the 470 property actually happened about the same time-ish. You've probably seen a little dink in the general fund, but that's money the general fund never had before we sold the property.
Okay, because we had 155 back in 2018, 19 year.
All right, so that was probably the first and last year the general fund took the money.
Okay.
Or took the full amount.
The full amount, right, okay, I understand. Okay, those were the only ones before we get to the departments.
Okay, so first up is the city commission. City commission budget's actually down $650. Any questions individually for that one?
Where's our 3%?
It's in there. By charter.
The promotional activities for all the different funds, what are those?
It could be, those are the payments that you pay.
Yeah, do you want to go, you just in,
Like in general, what, like for the city commission, they went up, what are they?
It's employee luncheon,
Yeah,
can we read them?
doesn't
Okay. So in city commission, we have the employee holiday luncheon is in there for 15,000.
Okay,
There's a MLK event sponsorship, the LSSC gala, the chamber gala, and then the chamber breakfast sponsor.
okay, so these are, okay, understood. And those are just spread throughout different funds?
Those
sounds
are,
like.
those are just in city commission, I don't,
Okay.
there's not in any
All
other
right.
funds that I can think off the top of
All
my
right.
head.
on executive, that's up a tick, mostly due to personnel. Any questions in executive?
Same promotional activities?
You are on, and you are
So that's
on
gonna be city manager.
city managers, where, okay, that's where I'm going.
Oh, that's Executive Department Administration Division.
Okay.
That's,
Yeah, we
I
have,
did- yeah.
well, and first in there, and I jumped ahead because
Yeah.
executive, I went right to administration.
Right.
So executive, this way, has got three branches in it. One is, well, that's the public outreach, that's the Lakefront TV contract. Two is administration, which is the city manager office, which is myself, Brandy, and Pam. And then those promotional activities are, Brandy, read them off.
Okay, Acres Media Ad, Chamber Gala, Education Foundation of Lake County, Chamber Magazine Ad, Miss Leesburg Scholarship Program, Black Heritage Gala, Chamber Teacher Appreciation Breakfast, Project Graduation, CDC Men of Distinction Drumline, Economic Development Event, CDC Breakfast, Chamber Golf Classic, and then just Wellness Challenge, CDC, a little bit of money for miscellaneous.
So essentially what I've done there is, we used to have a $100,000 city manager
Yeah.
contingency fee. And different groups would come to the city manager and seek funds, and within their spending authority, that contingency would go out. In your monthly briefs is where that money's spent. So as we've tried to cut the budget, I've reduced that from a $100,000 contingency to zero. But in exchange for that, what I've done is I've put in those organizational promotional activities and made that a budgeted item, and I've taken out the contingency. So we've saved maybe 50, 75 grand by flipping it like that. And then the city clerk budget. And elections. City attorney. And then the big one to close out executive is miscellaneous. Personnel services is our PTO sellback estimate. Operating expenses, various, what's in that number, Randy?
Just like, we have the cure payments that we pay, and some PD community services money, that's really all.
And then other is our shell game with DST revenue. We use the DST revenue to fund the general fund, to fund equipment purchases, to go back then and fund purchase of equipment, so it becomes a bit of a transfer.
Pay for debt.
And then the difference in these two big numbers that you see, the 5.1 million last year versus the 1.4 this year, which represents the big decrease too that you see from the 29 to the 26 million in overall general fund expenses, is the cash that you shifted last year from the fiber to the general fund to the capital improvements project. So you didn't do that this year, that's why you see that big change. Commissioner, Mayor, you asked that question at the onset. Where do we spend the fiber money? That's where it's showing you. Okay, so then finance. Finance has accounting. That's actually down just a little bit.
So I noticed we're dropping the deputy director position,
Yes.
which is, looks like we'll have one full less person in the division
Yes.
as well. We feel confident that we're
Yeah.
okay with that?
I do. I think
Okay.
all the department heads have been pretty good about leaning on existing staff and paying existing staff a little more, and then cutting positions that weren't needed, and then we get an overall reduction.
Okay, good. And the contract services in accounting?
That's the audit fee, isn't it?
No,
Oh, was that was,
separate. It's 20 grand. We haven't had it before.
that's Paul.
Oh, okay. All right, that makes,
there's
so you're
some-
gonna
there's
use it
some
outsource. Some,
Specialized audit services that we use
okay,
that person did, but we'll have to contract out.
right. Well, that seems like a good trade-off.
Any other accounting questions? Customer service? Pretty much stays the same.
I see we're gonna implement in-home energy audits. What are those?
That's on the electric department stuff.
No, it's in customer service.
Well, they used it as one of their bench measurements here, so they must be doing some sort of reporting. It must come through customer service, so they're saying that they're gonna do 200 energy through customer service. So the money comes from electric, but they must administer the program.
That's where the customer service agents are involved with helping with the, okay, so the customer call comes in to customer service. Hey, my hot water heater seems I'm spiking, I had a bad bill. So that goes to customer service. Customer service then calls Steve Davis over in electric, and then Steve goes out and looks at the lady's hot water heater, and then they run checks on it, and then, we make a recommendation. So what they're doing in that calculation is counting how many home energy audits they do. It's a function of electric, but customer services
Right.
manages it and tallies it.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
It's one of the justifications in the allocations.
Mhm.
And then procurement, I don't know, rush, but procurement, any questions there? Pretty much the same. Operations, no major changes.
Procurement.
Warehouse?
Do what?
Warehouse?
Hey, Al, I'm only getting about 1 out of every 8 words. What we're having here, if you guys can do this, if they could turn the mics down and everybody pull your mic closer, because they keep turning you up, trying to hear you on the camera, and it's causing a lot more feedback. And there's a button here, if you're not talking, you can push, and it'll help them with the feedback they say. Turn your mic off if you're not talking, like that right there.
Turn the room down.
Thank you, I can't hear well. I just can't, I just don't. Whew.
Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, but if you'll get closer to it, they won't have to turn it up as loud.
All right, whoa, that's still a little loud.
Yeah, just keep
that
turning
better?
him- Yeah, but just
Okay.
turn it down.
How's that?
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on warehouse? And then we move to human resources. No major changes in human resources.
What are the contract services?
It's the I gotta turn my mic on. Online application, system that they have.
Okay.
Can you say, I didn't hear that answer, I'm sorry.
Online
Online
application.
application system, online application system.
Okay.
All right, and then IT.
was just curious, I see we have a 15% target on the phishing click rate. That seems kind of high. What do we actually get
I didn't catch, 15% what?
on the phishing click rate? Like when you do those, how many people are opening them?
People click, I would have to ask, do you know the exact language? Yes, Tina.
This number
It's one of your performance measures.
That has to do with, we work with FMPA and their information technology department, and they send us phishing emails. And what we do is we track how many of our staff actually fall for the phishing email. And so when they click on it, they get a little window that comes up and says, you know, this is a phishing email. You know, you've been had, something that we need to worry about it from infecting the system, but it's just letting the user know. And so that's basically what we do. We track that.
Right, and that's what I'm questioning, I guess, and I don't need to know, I wouldn't expect you to know right now, but I know with the FMPA, when they do them internally, they're seeing like open rates of like low single digits. So 15% seems not good, and that's the goal. So I'm just curious what our past history is, so maybe you could give me that.
Well, I think we just started doing that 2 budgets ago, and
Okay.
you know, when we first started it, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
And so that 15% is actually lower than what it was. We do have an online education program that, you know, my network manager shoots out emails and basically says, hey, you know, beware of this, look for this. If you see this in the link, don't click on the link, so forth and so on. So it has been getting a little bit better.
Well, that's good.
But, you know,
Okay.
again, I mean, this is, you know, where, you know, people are unfortunately click happy sometimes and they'll just get an email. We did actually add a banner that said external email. So I think that's helped quite a bit, where folks, when they see that.
Maybe, okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you, sir.
GIS? Police Forfeiture Fund? Oh, that's the police, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the police department. That's a $200,000 increase in police.
So
Obviously, most of that's salaries.
on the police, because I know a big part of this is the body cams. So I'm not necessarily opposed to body cams, but I don't know that I'm ready to just sign off on it. One, I think that there's legislation at the federal level being proposed in the House and the Senate that would establish some guidelines and provide grant funding to cities. So I guess where I am right now is I don't mind budgeting for it, but that's something I would want it to come back and us maybe have a workshop on how it's going to be implemented, what their criteria are going to be. You know, I'm concerned not only you know, about the privacy of private individuals who are being recorded potentially without their consent, how that would be used, how we're going to determine when cameras are turned on and off, who has access to that. That's just such a broad and big thing, and it's not a one-time expense, like you said. It's a very expensive recurring that, for me to be okay with it, I'd want to do a much deeper dive on it. And then if there's going to be federal money available maybe in the next couple months, I certainly wouldn't mind waiting for some of that to be.
Okay, that's, and the budget assumes personnel. Some of the capital costs are a bit of a wash. This came up after the draft. That discussion can take place at the next regular meeting. That's where we'll have the agenda transmittal for you to consider the purchase of the capital.
Okay.
I can agree with that. I think we talked about this before, and wasn't there a question about storage of all this information and the amount of money that was going to cost?
Yes, and we had this conversation, I think, long ago. We opted not to do the body cams probably about 4 years ago. Just recently, we decided to recommend back to you to do it. The storage cost and the cam cost is part of the 215 that I showed you earlier tonight. That capital purchase will be before your consideration at the next regular meeting this year, on the
Okay.
13th. That's from the police chief. I think I think it's an incident from the George Floyd incident. I think there's a lot more thought about policing and policing strategies. And I think that incident got us to rethink a little bit the recommendation.
Okay. Well, I'll pile on with the comments. I appreciate Dan's comments. I wasn't aware of all the issues in Tallahassee and so forth, but when I saw the big number up there, I'm not a fan of spending that amount of money today, not in Leesburg. I mean, maybe I'm missing something. I welcome the chief's comments. I don't want to do it just because we're scared and everybody says it's the right thing to do. I mean, I just don't see the need in Leesburg today.
An hour next week. Anna, do you want to talk about this now or next week?
I think next week it'd be better.
Okay. And I don't mean to push off the
No,
discussion.
you mean
I mean, the
the-
discussion is coming.
No, it's fine. I don't care
And,
what you
and,
talk
and,
about.
and it's just the sequence, it's a reaction a little bit to the times. And I think we've gone from, and I'll speak for Chief now, and Chief can fill you in later. And I think that's kind of, I think Chief and I are kind of the perfect yin and yang there. The case before was, hey, Chief, why don't we do this? Internal discussions. You know, I was thinking it was a good thing. Chief was an advocate of police protection and some civil liberty issues for police officers. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, well, you want to know how much it costs? I was like, well, how much? He's like, 250 grand. I was like, I don't want to do it then. And now it's a little bit inverse. And I think as the chief talks to you guys about this on the 13th, I think the chief still has some concerns about it as far as invasion of personal privacy, invasion of police privacy, but I also think there's going to be mandates and other things that are going to change police practices, which is going to necessitate us doing it one day or another. So I think those are the conversations you'll have in preparation for that. After the budget was drafted, we started squirreling around and digging for money and added it to the budget presentation tonight. You'll have obviously a more in-depth conversation next week, and as a result of that, I will make sure not to put it on the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Because I remember discussions on it. I was just really surprised when I saw how big the numbers were. And I was going to bring it up, and obviously the other commissioners all jumped on
But
it. So, okay.
But those numbers we feel good in that they address the personnel you'll need, the software and hardware support, and the actual purchase of the cameras.
And what will the yearly cost be?
That number is going to be, we're going to say that's going to be the personnel cost, which is going to go around $63,000 for personnel and benefit, a forensic computer kind of person who's basically their job will be catalog, review, document, delete, add, subtract, retrieve. We anticipate we'll get significant requests for when an officer was doing what. So you'll have to be, reviewing and retrieving and collecting and answering those public records requests. So we think that's going to be a full-time job.
Yeah, but there'll be a service expense as well besides the personnel, won't there?
Well, he said the life expectancy of the equipment's 3 years.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
you're
we-
60 grand a year on equipment, basically.
We can charge for that public records request. Before I would answer that in detail, and we could probably offset that personnel expense with an increase in miscellaneous revenue. There is, and I only hesitate, Commissioner, because I think there's going to be a difference between what the law gives us some latitude on an unreasonable request and a standard request. So there is some time and material costs on unreasonable stuff, and the public records laws, our records need to be pretty clear. So whether we can recover full or whether we have to have it as part as our typical fee for a public records search, I think you could probably get some revenue out of that. I don't see you recovering 63,000. And I think it would probably be frowned on if you set up a retrieval of cams to be an immediate cost of a public record when that's not your standard cost around to provide a public record.
But what I'm asking was, what would our perpetual yearly cost be?
I'm gonna say close
Between
to,
personnel, storage, and having to buy replacements every.
I'm gonna stick with your $63,000 number, less a pretty menial revenue that we didn't put in.
It sounds like there's a lot of information we still have to get, especially with procedure with this. So let's start on the 13th and move it to that, okay?
We'll do it.
Thank you.
Also on the police, and I noticed a couple other departments as well, that the uniforms was way up. Is that like COVID supplies or what?
I don't have an answer for that unless it's a contractual thing.
Police
you
and fire
have an answer
specifically,
for
the
that?
uniform expenses were way up.
Is it just eyeglass and boots? It's eyeglass and boot we added in there. It's like $150, protective eyeglasses.
Oh, okay. All right.
We cover those.
And fuel purchases, why would fuel purchases be up?
We might be able to look at that a little bit.
Okay, would think they would be down.
And then we end up into the police forfeiture fund. Any questions there?
What is it?
The confiscated materials,
Oh.
this, and the 7,000 is just a generic placeholder number. That'll go up or down based on what's confiscated.
It's usually attorney.
And then the education fund. And the police impact fee fund. And then we jump over to fire. Fire's up a little bit, 132,000. That's in reference to personnel, but there's really no other operational changes in there. And again, at fire and police, we're going, we'll visit that in our meeting as regards the CBA.
I know insurance was up for everyone, but it seemed to be a much bigger number and percentage increase on the fire. You're over 20% increase.
We reallocate that every year based on like expenses, asset value across the board. So they all kind of shift all over the place.
Okay, got it.
We reallocate it, so.
They just have a higher percent.
But it did go up in total, obviously property insurance and all that.
What was the property
I think it
rate
was-
increase, do you know?
I think we did 15% is what
It was
I,
around
15.
50%, but we added,
Wow.
we added multiple millions of dollars of property over the last
Exactly.
year as well, including this building.
Oh, okay,
Everything.
yeah, the
New fire
addition.
truck,
New
you know,
fire truck.
those-
Yeah.
We've added a lot of,
So it wasn't a 15% rate increase, that's,
no, we haven't seen the numbers, it's probably gonna be about 5.
okay, all
But
right,
the rest of it was in asset value.
got it.
Is the fire department seeking additional personnel this year?
No,
None at all.
none at all. Public Works, we start with street maintenance.
Is this, where is the increase of the or bringing the janitorial staff in-house? Is that in this division?
It's
or-
it's the next page in facilities.
Okay. Could we get a little information about why we're doing that? The cost seems to be a lot more. You're talking about going from 50
Okay,
to
yeah,
85.
and we talked about that at the onset. So our cost is some operational costs and about the $86,000 in the personnel. We were under contract for about $56,000, and the bottom line is that we weren't happy with their service. The restroom facilities, other facilities weren't getting cleaned. Operationally, what we would have done next is to go to the next low bid, to keep it functional. And that bid was around 75,000. And so instead of going to the next low bid, we felt the differential between bringing it in-house for about 15,000 more was worth the increase. We brought that back to the commission. Do you remember when that was, DC? Back in February-ish, March? It was this year sometime during fiscal year 20. We put together a presentation for you. Y'all approved it. So we brought on the two positions, but they never formally got it into the budget.
Okay, and we're able to just, we've been able to keep up with the schedule with the two positions. That's working?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the short answer is yes, and the workload's been up since COVID, so we've just been able to manage it better, keep track of it better respond, and you get to different facilities. The classic example there is when the COVID thing hit, shifting kind of the workload from some of the restroom facilities that we closed down, and then using those personnels to double up at City Hall, library, and those type of things.
Okay. And then also, what's the large increase in minor furniture and equipment? This is for facilities maintenance.
Yes.
That's okay.
They have some trail signs for 22,000.
Some what?
Trail signs.
Trail signs.
Do you see?
Trail signs?
Trail signs.
Trail signs.
Trail.
Trail. What?
Trail
what-
signs.
Maybe we could get some.
I said I hate this sound system.
I think it's the acoustics because I can hear fine here, but you guys are over there.
In that category to upgrade and replace and renew the signage in parks. And we've got about $10,000 in that category for additional barricades to kind of refurbish the stockage of barricades that we use for special events.
Why do we need more barricades for special events?
Well, it's the plastic barricades that we've got that are, they just get damaged, they need to be
Okay, it's just
upgraded.
replacement.
And, yeah, these are for the most part replacement. There are some sort of restockage. We find out that we need a little bit more to cover an area that we weren't able to cover before, but for the most part, it's just replacing barricades that get lost or moved around, and we'll find the cross member but not the legs, and we find the legs and that kind of stuff.
Got it.
Protester damage, Dan.
And DC, these are housed at the city's department. These barricades, where are they housed at? So any citizen of Leesburg who needs a special event can reach out to you?
They can. We've supported special events with putting up barricades at different places. We don't have a process right now that if you want to block off your neighborhood
I just want to
street.
make sure the city's buying them, the city's responsible for them. We don't have to go through a third party to get the city's property.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Just want to make sure if the city's buying them, that a citizen of Leesburg who's on a special event doesn't have to go through a third party to use the city's barricades.
Yeah. We've, like the boxing event that folks have at the gym, we put barricades in there to help. If folks...
I was just being facetious, that's all.
Any other facility questions? Grounds is next.
Now, on grounds, I see we've gone pretty much entirely contract services on the medians. I would take it. That's the 486,000.
Right, that's correct.
And in that case, you feel we are better doing it outsourced.
I think two things on that, and DC and I have gone round and round in agreement on this, but A, we're covering more territory with we've invested significantly in our right-of-ways. So we've increased our workload. And B, in areas where DOT doesn't cut the grass in the right-of-ways to the frequency that we've seen. And this is probably a commissioner complaint that I'll get or DC will get, which, you'll get a citizen call, somebody driving down Newell Hill, and, you got US Open rough in those right-of-ways in the summertime, and the DOT plan was to cut it, once a quarter. So in the summertime, that's horrible. You guys, your phone rings. So the increase in contract coverage goes for doing our own maintenance on areas that we've taken, and then taking over areas and putting more emphasis on cutting the state right-of-ways where they don't want to do it to our level because we're designated rural route, and then finding that the contract maintenance gets it done and saves us the personnel.
Okay.
Yes, we're taking on a little bit more expense there, but B, I think we've made our right-of-ways significantly more attractive, doing DOT's job a little bit because of our designation, but at the end of the day, I think that investment's well worth the change in aesthetics that you see driving through Leesburg. And then that's Public Works Administration. Okay, and then we'll move into community development, which is planning and zoning, which pretty much operationally is the same.
Hopefully we'll be changing our goal for business taxes to 0.
We will.
We will. We'll fix that.
And housing, again, no major changes there. And then library. Then we slide over into recreation. The overall programs, that's your maintenance stuff, right? That's all field programs budget. So that chart we have up here, the 1.7 to increase, that's facility maintenance, Sleepy Hollow, Susan Street, your marina. Again, revenues are on the revenue side. Our numbers are in surplus, about 175 to 200,000.
Do we take care of the baseball stadium with this money?
This money,
Not
that program,
not
that- the program's money.
Right.
It's blended in here.
And what do we pay yearly on that? What is the expenditure?
Unless Travis knows that off your head. Well, yeah. I have to, if you want to break down of each facility.
Well, actually,
let
I
me
had
get
a
that to you.
request that the seats and the benches in there really need some cleaning up. So that's why I'm asking where this is taken care of.
That's an easy one.
Okay.
If you
I
want
mean,
to
the benches are bad. Those guys sitting on that wood bench, anyway.
Okay.
And the comment about cleaning up the stadium itself, either washing, power washing, or painting the concrete seats.
Okay. That's more of a maintenance than a budget issue, so
Okay.
I'll get with
And
Travis.
part of
on
that has
Somebody's
been,
gotta pay for it.
well, I would say historically, the baseball clubs have taken on a lot of maintenance because we provide the field maintenance and the use of it for free. And
Yeah,
they have, we don't have much Leesburg city sports going on. We kind of do that just for them.
Yeah, that's more of an operations matter than a budget matter. I'll get with Travis on it.
On the marina,
Marina.
See, the wet slips are consistently at 100% occupancy. I think we should raise those rates. The dry slip, I think we've gone far enough because it does seem that that's dropping finally. But
We'll go back and look at those wet slip rates. And then the recreation impact fees. And that really runs up the general fund. So before you move into civic funding, are there any questions to close out the general fund? So Commissioner?
Are we budgeted for a better PA system? I have a terrible time here and
Yes.
understanding. Okay. I wasn't being smart. I cannot hear.
You guys have some money stashed away for that?
Okay, I know we talked about
When
it.
we brought to you the 90 grand to do
Okay.
the system, and then we were on around, so I'll give you an update on that.
Okay. This is actually the first meeting I've had trouble hearing. I'm having a terrible time hearing.
And maybe that's me.
Okay, no.
Okay, so
you
look.
change your spot. See, Mal's normally over here.
So we brought to you the modification to spend about 90 grand. The commission rejected that.
I remember all that.
Okay, so we went back and researched. I think at that meeting, Commissioner Hurley mentioned to the commission about using a consultant that he had, so from Virginia. We contacted that consultant. That consultant came in. That consultant did a report that was provided to us within the past week. Part of that report was some modifications to the sound system, some different soundproofing materials, and he could only do the review based on the way the volume and the mechanics of the system were set up. So he recommended that we adjust that. So that's what we're in the process of doing. I hope to get back to you guys a report here very shortly on the next fix.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't being smart. I'm just struggling to hear. And,
Essentially, the report said some changing and reconfiguring of the sound system and some paneling. He estimated a level of around 30 grand.
Thank you.
Did you say 30?
Mm-hmm.
Well, at least it's cheaper.
It's better than 90.
Better than 90.
So with the general fund, we'll take a look at the fuel. We'll take a look at some issues with Pat Thomas, and we'll come back to you with a recommendation on the wet slips. All right, so with that, you're left with the civic funding issues. And as the mayor requested at the outset of the meeting, what's before you is typically funded. We used to fund the civic funding with gas monies. When we got into the TICA lawsuit and all that stuff, we shifted it over to solid waste to take a break on gas surpluses. And we'll talk about that, I guess, on Thursday. In the interim, I think this is year 3 that we've gone from solid waste, and those levels are the same. So each year, for the past several years, you've asked to do the civic funding program like this. We brought to you the same thing, gotten your feedback, and then we've programmed the civic funding as we talked to you earlier. Once you approve the budget, we've sent out the grant award letters to these organizations in those amounts. So
is the partnership cash, or is it cash and in-kind?
No, those are all cash awards. Okay. Cash from the city to those organizations in those amounts.
Okay.
I'd like to see us, if we could, take the melon patch up to 10. I know they've got a lot of stuff going on.
I'm sorry, did you say up to 10?
10.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. They've had to shut down indefinitely at this point. They've tried to open up, but then couldn't do that. So, and they still get a utility bill, unlike a lot of the other organizations up there. So,
I can agree with that as well.
and so I do have a comment on the partnership funding. So, we just agreed to the 78,000, and I thought it was pretty clear from the majority of the commission and definitely the majority of the audience that there was a big desire to see the Main Street manager brought back based on the amount of stuff that was going on in the community. If you look at all the stuff that happened through COVID, all the videos that were being put out, that was the Main Street manager. In fact, she's still doing stuff despite not having a job there. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who were very surprised that the partnership elected not to bring her back. Then after that feedback, my understanding is they reconsidered, but came to the same decision after the executive board met. So my feeling on that is that if they don't want to bring her back, they don't need that money, and that we should find another organization that is willing to take that money and bring the Main Street manager back. If they want to keep doing it, fine, but that's something I think they need to tell us. And if they don't, then I think we should approach the chamber or the Center for the Arts or whoever would be willing to do that and bring that program, because I think it's really important to Leesburg.
Well, my understanding from the meeting was, in order to keep Joni, we had to give them 200.
No, they have enough money right now, they confirmed, to operate for 6 months with both positions.
Quite frankly, I think we were being told something that was popular that night, and they never had any intention of bringing those two individuals back.
Well, I don't agree with that, but.
Well, that's the way it
Well,
is.
I know the one, what's her name, was not coming back. She had already found employment elsewhere.
But they don't deny that they can operate for 6 months with the two employees, but they don't want to. So
Well,
they don't want to, they don't need more money.
Yeah, I heard two different dates that night. I heard them say they could operate through September and December. I was a little bit unclear on that, but I guess, the basis of my vote was on Al's recommendation, and Al helped me out here, but your analysis was the 78,000 would carry, not that we're trying to tell the partnership how to run it, but your analysis of 78,000 was enough to pay Joe and a Main Street manager at a reduced salary. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And that's why I voted on it.
Yeah,
That's
and
why I
for
voted
6
on it.
months, they
And
Sandy said
I
yes.
thought it was through the end of September, but whatever it is.
Yeah, it's till December, actually.
Okay.
And I've confirmed that with them. They agree that those numbers are right. But their opinion is that they don't want to do it. They want to save the cash. And so I just,
I hear you. I've had phone calls on it as well, and I said it in the meeting why I supported the partnership. They do three great things. There's bike fest, whether you like it or not. I call them the quality of life events, all the other local events that the community likes that cover a lot of different bases, and then the big part of it is the Main Street program. That's the basis of the partnership being formed. So I don't know what happened there, but there is some talk.
Excuse me. Thank you. I wasn't accusing you of using the phone. I just want to ask you, do you think it might be time for a workshop and to start to bring in some ideas about what to do with the partnership? Because we know that things are getting really out of hand with that. And I think there's other, as you said, other organizations that can start getting more involved. And I think of what I mentioned with you before, the art is bringing in tremendous amount of interest into Leesburg. But I also think that we have individuals who can take over the roles of the partnership and do just as good a job, if not better, and we have visibility on where the money is being used.
This is a question immediately for me to
Yes.
advise the commission. So I have not been asked that question publicly before. I will provide you this answer. I think that is a slippery slope for the city commission. I think my professional opinion on the partnership is that it is an extremely important organization for this community. Twofold. A, the events that they provide, from Bike Fest to the fireworks to the different things, all of those event things and the entertainment part. And B, the Main Street part, which I would label as a lobbying organization. which is the downtown organization, the downtown businesses lobbying the city commission for specific event or specific improvements and investment in Leesburg's downtown. That's how I picture the partnership. Two very important aspects. Those aspects are funded by this commission because I think the city commission believes in that mission. That board is operated by a totally different body. And I think it would be a slippery slope for this commission to start dictating how that board operates. So having a joint workshop, I think, is a difficult position for this body to be in. Having said that, I think you speak to that board through your funding levels. If you're happy with them, you will fund them. If you are not happy with them, you won't fund them. And I think they get their direction from you in that category. And I think this body seems to be obviously mixed with the 3-2 votes that you've had on the topic. And I think at the last meeting, you gave them loud and clear direction that $78,000 was what you were going to fund until such time that they seek funding through the county from the CARES Act. And I think this body appropriately acted. I think this body appropriately funded the necessary dollars they needed to make it through to September. And frankly, I think you appropriately kicked the can down the road. I scoff at those that say that this body has not supported the partnership. I think you've done that. I think you've done that and then some. And I think this fiscal year's budget, or the next year's fiscal year budget, of the continued funding as you've done for the past several years, is that commitment. Anything beyond that, and for you to have a joint meeting and dictate to the partnership, I think that's a slippery slope, Mayor.
Okay, but we've already given them enough money to handle them until the end of the year. Is it really necessary to hand them another $38,000?
My recommendation to this body would be to continue to do what you've done in the past. That $38,000 is part of the matrix, in my opinion, that is provided in that cash flow spreadsheet that I presented to the commission via the packet. I wouldn't recommend that you change that makeup.
That we do or we
That
don't?
you would not change that makeup.
So, yeah, so what I'm.
But look, civic funding is always a touchy topic.
It is.
You ask my opinion, this is what you've done in the past. If you want to decrease or increase, and I know other organizations like Leesburg Art has asked for more money. And I think you have several options. You can change the 181,975 amount within that and shift those blocks around, or you can go grab a couple of more bucks from the solid waste fund. Solid waste fund is sitting on $2 million cash above their reserve. So I would warn again, if you're going to go grab 10, 15, 20 grand of that cash to help out a couple of organizations and maybe increase that 181, okay. But remember, the more you take out of solid waste, the less you have to fund big capital improvement projects. So if we're only talking, that 10, 15, 20 grand number, okay. I understand that, especially now when times are tough. But but you understand the flip side, and I think my recommendation is pretty clear.
Well, I'll just say, I think there's clearly been a little bit of grumbling about the money, but I don't want to pull the rug out from under the partnership. I've been consistent in saying I'm a supporter. I would support this number. I'm assuming it's funded quarterly. I don't think it's just, this money is funded quarterly to the partnership?
No, that's a lump sum check.
Okay.
We do first part of October, and then we get the backup supporting material. It rolls a little bit, but once we get the backup supporting material, and you're supposed to provide us expense reports, and when we get that, we cut you a check.
Okay, well, after giving them $78,000, I don't want to pull the rug out from under them on this money. That's my position.
Well, the thing is, and I would generally be in favor of that, keeping this, but they've already said they're not going to keep their staffing levels. So if they're only going to have one person at a reduced salary, I don't know why they need the money. In fact, if we take the money, give it to someone else and say, you do the Main Street program, the partnership has come out ahead because the Main Street program cost way more than $38,750. So if someone else is willing to take it out because they won't do it, they should be happy at this point, because they've been very clear they won't.
Well, we could always deal with it. I mean, we kind of did kick the can down the road, what, to September? So we could always readdress this.
Well, we've kicked it down the can till like April, because if they're not gonna hire any other people, they've got enough money to last, well, about a year.
I guess, in my position, my position was, I just want to give them enough money to stay alive through the CARES Act money, which is September. And
Yeah.
I just want to relook at it at that point entirely. But, well, I don't want to get off on a big partnership tangent again. I'll still support this number. It is, I am hearing some grumblings on the streets about where the money's going.
Well, I think it's, I definitely understand, all of us had the understanding that the Main Street was going to continue, and we all I fully support that the Main Street program needs to continue. I do not believe that there's any organization right now in Leesburg that can take over the role of the partnership and do what it does. I love all these wonderful people who are volunteering, but we don't have anybody who can fill those shoes and do as good a job as being done. That just can't happen. And it's just simple experience, contacts. I mean, most of our people, if they do have any idea what to do, is because they've worked with the partnership. So I don't want to go down the road and start saying, let's start looking for somebody else to take over the roles of that. Number two, I think it's a little hasty of us just to say we haven't met with them, we don't know what they're doing, we haven't seen anything, and I understand that, but nobody's talked to the partnership. We haven't had a board meeting. I haven't heard, Al, have you had any meetings with the partnership about what they're doing with Main Street?
No, sir.
So, I think it's a little early for us to, 2 weeks later, just say, well, they didn't act fast enough, and we're just gonna cut 38,000 when we're fighting with a room full of people in here supporting them to give them 75,000. Now we're gonna say we're gonna cut that. And we don't even know if they're gonna get the CARES Act money. I think we're all hoping they do. I think they qualify for it and shouldn't have any issue getting it, but we don't know what's gonna happen or how much that money is. So, I think right now that supporting them and continuing on, I mean, this happens in October. Obviously, there'll be a lot of things come up and a lot of answers. And I would be the first one. I have no problem myself because I serve on that board. I'm the liaison represented on it, but I have no problem reaching out and finding out from the board what their thinking is. I haven't heard anything, and I could bring that back to us and let us know why that hasn't been taken forward. If it's Joni don't want to do it, they need to find somebody else. If they don't want to do it no more, but before.
The executive board, or maybe the board hasn't met, which is another problem, but
I'm
the
sorry.
executive board, the board hasn't met, which is a problem, I think, but the executive board made the decision that they do not want to bring her back.
They have?
And I remember the first commission meeting when they came into us, not the last one, the one before that, when they made the request to, sell the property to us and all that. Some of the commissioners asked a question, could they run it with one person? Joe said they could. He could run, the entire operation. I remember that. That's on the record.
Oh, yeah.
Just FYI. I mean, so he was including the Main Street program in that comment.
Oh, yeah, I disagree that Joe can run the Main Street.
Okay, I'm just saying that's what we were told.
Right. Yes, and you are correct.
I do too, because in my meeting, I said he don't wear a Superman cape, and nobody can do all that by
and that
themselves.
also led to a discussion. That led to a discussion by the commission of, are we throwing good money after bad? That was the exact language used. Can Joe do this by himself? And we were questioning that, but we were told he could.
Yeah.
By Sandy and
Well,
Joe.
no one person can do all that.
Okay.
So anyway, bottom line, I don't think we should cut their funding. I would like to take and add some more to the melon patch. So if we had to pull a little bit from, who was it?
I would recommend that you just grab $4,500 out of solid waste.
Solid waste.
Don't defund anybody, just.
Yeah.
Grab how much, Al? How much?
If Commissioner Hurley recommended 10,000 for melon patch, so the difference is 4,500. So I would go over and grab it from solid waste.
I think we just make it clear that it's a one-time increase because of COVID, because, you know, I do worry about these things growing, and I think they're generally happy with the normal amount, but
Yeah.
it's exceptional circumstances.
Okay, don't
That-
forget about
that's
the
a-
arts
We
center.
will make that note, fiscal year 21 only.
So it'll come back next year at 10,000.
Please make a note about the arts center.
What,
I want to increase the funding to the arts center
how
because
much?
the amount.
Now is the time to talk about that,
All
Mayor.
right. Now, you've got it listed as art festival. Is that just putting on that art festival and that's
No,
where your
yeah, I
funding
got it
comes
listed
from?
wrong.
No,
That's what you get, right? That's your legal name? Yeah, that's it. That's what you're recommending to increase.
All right.
Do you have a number? Now's the time, so we can allocate and put it in there and make the final version.
15,000.
Yeah, so you're talking 4,330. Yeah.
This would enable the Arts Center to go ahead and start with their festivals and whatnot, and they take income from those festivals and all the programs that are planned for visiting artists. You still have the visiting artists, and you still have the programs for the kids.
I'm
They're
just
not
saying,
shutting down this year.
I'm just saying, when you say festival, I think of people coming.
No, that's the name of the organization.
Is that a permanent or a one-time thing, Mayor?
Well, we have the Arts Center here tonight, so I'd like to ask them, will that be enough to keep you
You're on the
going?
hot seat.
I'm sure she wants it.
No, so I could have answered that question for her.
So I'm Maria, with the Executive Director for the Leesburg Center for the Arts. We're asking for the increase to start investing in the public arts program that we have. We're using that as matching funds to go after grant dollars. That pays for a call for artists, so we can get artists that are outside of the Leesburg area to come in and create some murals in downtown. We're using that also as, like I said, matching grant dollars for a touring sculpture garden, hopefully to do that at Moat Morris when Moat Morris opens. So that it gives us we always talk about us being the public art arm for the city. This gives us the funding and the investment to go really full-fledged and go towards that. It takes admin costs to craft these call for artists, to get people here, and I think this kind of helps us with we're creating an ordinance, creating a commission, a council for a public arts commission or public arts council, however you want to call that, so that we can start really thinking about public arts as being part of the city of Leesburg's DNA.
So can you use this money this year, especially for the grant funding money that you have to have?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then just revisit it again next year?
Yes, ma'am.
There's your answer, okay?
And so
Just this year.
could we also, so if we do
voted
this,
permanent.
can we get like a report at the end of the year with what you use the money for in terms of public arts, so we can kind of see?
I mean, I would support at least bumping it permanently now if there's enough support for that. I think they do a tremendous job. And I remember being on the partnership board when they were started. They've come a long way.
Anything else we need to discuss?
So I'd kind of like to know whether, I certainly know where some of the commission stands on all of it, on the idea that the partnership money be contingent on hiring a full-time Main Street manager. Commissioner Hurley would then go back to the board, talk to them about it, and they can say yes or no, and if they say no, then we can,
No, I think that's reasonable.
yeah.
And, and just to look, my advice to you earlier was it's a slippery slope to get in their business, and that's a joint meeting, but you do have influence with your funds. So if it is the unified decision in this workshop, then I think from a workshop decision, I would instruct the city manager to let the partnership know that their 38,710, which is funded as part of the fiscal year 21 budget and formally approved in September, is on in obeyance, as they will be seeing whether or not they fund the Main Street position from now going forward.
Well, I don't.
Is that a reasonable message to deliver?
I don't like the idea of mandating they create the position. I just want to be sure the job gets done. And so that was really, I guess, I look at it from the commission standpoint. We gave them the money, and they said they could get the job done with one person. If they can do it, fine. If not, then they need to figure it out. So I am troubled by us micromanaging them, and I know that's what's making you nervous.
Well,
But I think it's fair to say that we deem the Main Street program to be an important part of the partnership, if I can say it that way. And then let them figure it out.
And
my problem is that at some point, we're given so much money to fund one staff member, I just can't, at some point, I'm just gonna be no. Because what are you gonna do with it?
And listen, I'm not trying, and just to be clear, I'm not trying to, and I understand exactly what you're saying, and I respect that 100%.
I'm walking a fine line here because I am pro-partnership.
No, well, hell, I mean, everybody knows I'm pro-partnership. I mean, I've showed that everywhere there is. But my issue, with what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to micromanage. What I'm trying to do is basically what Dan is doing is justify the amount. So to me, I see a dollar amount worth, and so for me, I'm not saying if they don't want to do it, that's fine. And then we can do what the mayor is talking about and look for somebody else if they want out of it. But if they're going to ask for those, if we're going to keep giving funds based on this criteria, because they're saying we need funds to do A, B, and C, and we're willing to help, I think that it's only fair that we have the expectancy that they're going to follow through with that.
Yeah, I think we made it clear that night that the three categories were important to the city, and that's why we justified the funding.
And so I have
categories
no
of
problem.
things they do.
And I think you're probably right. It's probably better if it comes from Al than me.
I think it, not to interrupt you, Commissioner, but I think at this stage, this is a workshop, so we don't give direction, everything, you give direction and then we formalize it later. So I think the best thing for me to do is express to the commission, or to the partnership, and I will do it via email to Joe and Sandy Stokes. Your sentiments on this funding will be determined based on your actions in hiring a Main Street manager, and this $38,710 will be formalized in September. And I think I can eloquently deliver that message and provide some of the skepticism that some of the members of the commission have, and I think they'll get the message. And then when you go back and review this document and formalize it in September, you can revisit that item.
The other way to go, if they really don't want to hire back the downtown people, is why don't you move that agency over to Chamber of Commerce and have it run as a city project, and that's only downtown business.
Right. And again, that's where I think we get into a slippery slope as this body, but I do think you have, your financial, you have a financial stick, and you've given me direction to provide to the commission prior to your vote on your final vote on the funding, which will happen in September. So I'll write that up correctly, I think eloquently. I will send that to Joe and Sandy, and I'll CC all the members of the commission on it as well.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
So we're going to increase the Center for the Arts for 1 year, or for this year, or permanently?
No, it'll be this year, and then they will represent next year. If at that time things have really moved along and they need additional grant money, okay. Okay, I think that's it.
We're square. All right, so we will reconvene on Thursday at 5:30, and we'll talk about capital improvement projects and enterprise funds.
Just so you know, guys, I'm going on vacation tomorrow night, so I will not be here Thursday. So if it's something conservative, no, I support it. If it's not, no, I'm against it.
Okay, the meeting is going to be here on Thursday, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Could we move it? Could we?
Hey, Brent, I'm gonna steal this back.
Yeah.
Huh? No, my USB.
Is there anything that says that we Can we just have this and the people?
I get,
Jesus Christ, God, my head is so. Yeah, you said that. I can't even. 9 hours ago.
I got her.
You know, I had trouble when I was sitting over there.
Okay, I think
You're
Dan's got it.
buddy. Yeah.
I don't know what.
I was just gonna know where, I mean, what I mean is we don't have an error.
Hello.
Record it without a record, without an error. So here's the secret. The very opposite happens. The closer you get to the mic, if you don't do it, preachers always do it. If you eat the mic, they can turn it down so low. Okay?
I know, I was leaning into it earlier and getting beef. That's why I stepped back, so then you
And
couldn't
then he
hear
just
me.
kept turning it up and up and up to get it. But you have to mute the mic. So there's two, you know microphones, there's what there's called omnidirectional. Okay. So one microphone, it records sound this big in a straight line. So anything out here, it can pick it up straight. And then there's omni, which is broad. It goes out like this and picks up everything. So these mics are broad. Whatever. So if I'm standing here, you're talking and I cough, it's going to pick me up.
Right, I got you.
Singers, they use this. That's why they can't move their head away from that mic, because if they move their head, it don't pick them up. So the idea is they bought these punch-out ones, which I think are awesome. Everybody, if they turn them off when they're not talking, it won't pick up any room noise.
If I
But
speak into one of
it
those,
would be
will it be
better. Yes. But the closer you can get, everybody, the closer we can get to those microphones, the lower the volume, which
I'll mess
picks up
with it.
less of everything else than just your voice.
I'll mess with it tomorrow.
So,
Okay. No, I'll bring it. No, actually, I got it. I got it. Okay. Thanks, guys. See you guys later.
saying, you could set up a camera for 3 at a time, just lock them down.
Is that 6 feet from each chair, or is that includes?
What's that?
That is includes 6 feet from each chair. You guys have it out?
Anne Marie, where's my keys?
Let's just go. All right. What else can I do? This? Okay.
I'm just glad that went off without a hitch. What's that? What's that? What's wrong? I know. I can't hear it. Beautiful building.